Captain Aisha Morgan woke before dawn, as she always did, in her small apartment near Joint Base Andrews, Maryland. The sky outside was still a bruised purple, the kind of quiet hour where the world felt like it belonged to her alone. She stood before her mirror, adjusting the crisp lines of her flight suit, the navy fabric hugging her frame with precision. The patch on her chest bore the insignia of the 332nd Fighter Squadron, the modern heirs to the Tuskegee Airmen, and below it, her name, Captain A. Morgan. She traced the embroidered letters with her thumb, a ritual that grounded her. This wasn't just a uniform, it was a testament to every barrier she'd shattered to earn it. Today, Aisha was headed to a high-profile defense symposium in Arlington, Virginia, hosted by Horizon Dynamics, a rising star in aerospace technology. The event was a magnet for Pentagon brass, tech moguls, and international contractors, all converging to discuss the future of air superiority. Aisha had been invited as a guest speaker, a rare honor for a captain, to discuss her experience piloting the F-35 Lightning II in joint NATO exercises. She wasn't there to posture or network, she was there to represent her squadron and prove that her presence in the cockpit was no fluke. The symposium was held in a sleek convention center, all glass and polished steel, with banners touting innovation in flight draped across the entrance. Aisha stepped inside, her boots clicking softly on the marble floor. The room buzzed with suits, tailored blazers, silk ties, and dresses that cost more than her monthly rent. Her flight suit stood out, a stark contrast to the corporate sheen, and she felt the weight of eyes on her as she moved toward the check-in desk. At the desk, a man in his 40s, sporting a badge that read Elliot Crane, event coordinator, looked up with a practiced smile. "Name, please," he asked, his eyes flicking over her uniform. "Captain Aisha Morgan, 332nd Fighter Squadron." "I'm on the 10 a.m. panel for multi-domain operations," she said, her voice steady. Crane's smile faltered as he scanned his tablet. "Right, Captain Morgan," he paused, then leaned toward a colleague, a woman with a severe bun and a name tag reading Claire Hensley, operations lead. They whispered briefly, their glances darting toward Aisha. Claire approached, her heels clicking with purpose. "Captain Morgan, welcome," Claire said, her tone clipped. "I'm afraid we have a slight issue. This event has a strict business attire policy. Your uniform, it's a bit out of place." Aisha's jaw tightened, but her expression remained neutral. "This is my professional attire. I was invited to represent the Air Force. This uniform is standard for such occasions." Claire's smile was thin, almost patronizing. "We understand, but we're curating a specific atmosphere for our attendees. The uniform might be distracting. There's a lounge where you could change into something more appropriate." Aisha's eyes narrowed slightly. "Distracting to whom, exactly?" Claire didn't blink. "It's about maintaining a cohesive look for our stakeholders. I'm sure you understand. We wouldn't want anything to overshadow the discussion." The words hung in the air, sharp and unspoken, "You don't belong here, not like this." Aisha felt the familiar sting, the one she'd felt as the only black woman in her flight training cohort, the one who'd been told her braids were unprofessional or her confidence was aggressive. But she didn't argue. She gave a curt nod, turned, and walked out, her posture ramrod straight. In the parking lot, she slid into her car, the leather seats still cool from the morning air. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles tight, and let out a slow breath. This wasn't new. She'd faced worse, cadets who'd whispered she was a diversity hire, instructors who'd scrutinized her every move, expecting failure. But this slight, this casual dismissal, burned in a way that fueled her. They didn't just reject her uniform, they rejected her place in their world. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a contact labeled Colonel Elena Vasquez, NATO liaison. Elena had been her mentor during a joint exercise in Germany, where Aisha had first flown the Eurofighter Typhoon alongside NATO allies. The line rang twice before Elena's warm, accented voice answered. "Aisha, what's up? You at that fancy symposium yet?" "Elena, I need a favor," Aisha said, her voice calm but resolute. She explained the situation in clipped sentences, no embellishment, just facts. Elena listened without interrupting. When Aisha finished, Elena's voice was firm. "Say no more. I've got a friend at Ramstein who owes me one. Give me an hour. The call ended, and Aisha sat in silence, the hum of her resolve louder than the engine idling beneath her. Her mind drifted to her roots. Aisha grew up in Oakland, California, where the skyline was punctuated by the roar of planes from the nearby Naval Air Station. Her father, a mechanic, would take her to air shows, pointing out the sleek lines of F-14s and telling her stories of the red tails, the black pilots who defied odds in World War II. At 15, she joined the Civil Air Patrol, the only girl in her unit, learning to march and read maps while her peers partied. At 19, she earned a slot at the Air Force Academy, where she endured 4 years of scrutiny, her grades dissected, her leadership questioned, her presence a constant anomaly. She graduated in the top 10%, her name etched on the honor roll, but she never celebrated. She just kept moving, through flight school, through deployments, through missions where she proved her worth in the sky. Inside the convention center, the symposium hummed alone. Attendees mingled over artisanal coffee, discussing hypersonic propulsion and AI-driven targeting systems. Horizon Dynamics had spared no expense. Holographic displays showcased their latest drones, and a scale model of an F-35 gleamed under spotlights. Claire Hensley moved through the crowd, her tablet glowing with updates. She'd already forgotten Aisha, her focus on ensuring the event ran like clockwork. Near a display of next-gen radar systems, a young engineer named Marcus Tate, one of the few black employees at Horizon, lingered. He'd seen Aisha at check-in, her flight suit a quiet badge of authority, and felt a pang when she left. He knew that look, the one you wear when you're forced to swallow disrespect and keep moving. Marcus, fresh out of MIT, was still finding his footing at Horizon. He'd been hired for his work on composite materials, but he often felt like a token, his ideas dismissed in meetings unless echoed by someone else. Seeing Aisha walk away reminded him of every time he'd bitten his tongue. He pulled out his phone, pretending to check messages, but his mind was on her. Where had she gone? Would she come back? Meanwhile, Aisha was already in motion. Elena's call came an hour later, her voice crackling with excitement. It's done. Ramstein's cleared a Eurofighter Typhoon for a demo flight tomorrow morning. You're listed as the pilot, courtesy of a NATO exchange protocol. You'll fly out of Andrews at 0600. Ground crew's already prepping. Aisha's lips curved into a rare smile. You're a miracle worker, Elena. Don't thank me yet, Elena said. You're gonna have to nail this. No room for error. I don't plan on giving them any, Aisha replied. She drove to Joint Base Andrews, the familiar sprawl of runways and hangars calming her nerves. The Eurofighter Typhoon, a sleek beast of a jet, was waiting in a hangar under the watchful eye of Staff Sergeant Javier Ruiz, a no-nonsense mechanic who'd worked with Aisha on previous missions. Heard you're stealing the show tomorrow, he said, wiping grease from his hands. This bird's ready. You? Always, she said, running her hand along the jet's smooth fuselage. The Typhoon was a marvel, agile, responsive, with a thrust-to-weight ratio that made it dance in the sky. She'd flown it during a NATO exercise in Estonia, outmaneuvering seasoned pilots in mock dogfights. Tomorrow, she'd use it to make a point. Back at the symposium, the day wound down with a keynote on autonomous combat systems. Claire and her team reviewed the schedule for the next day's air demonstration, a highlight meant to showcase Allied aircraft. The lineup included an F-22 Raptor, a British Typhoon, and a Swedish Gripen. No one mentioned a second Typhoon, and no one knew Aisha's name was on the flight manifest. Claire, sipping a latte, remarked to Elliot, "Smooth day, considering that uniform hiccup." Elliot shrugged. Optics matter. She didn't fit the vibe. Marcus overheard, his jaw tightening. He slipped away to the terrace, where the demonstration would take place tomorrow. The sky was clear, the stars just beginning to prick through. He wondered what Aisha was planning, and whether she'd shake this place to its core. Aisha spent the evening in the hangar, reviewing flight patterns with Ruiz. The Typhoon's cockpit was a second home, its controls an extension of her instincts. She mapped out a sequence: low pass, barrel roll, high G-climb, designed to command attention without breaking protocol. This wasn't about recklessness, it was about precision. She wanted them to see what they'd dismissed, to feel the weight of her skill. At 4 a.m., she suited up, her movements deliberate. The flight suit felt like armor, each zipper and patch a reminder of her journey. She thought of her father, his calloused hands fixing engines, his quiet pride when she earned her wings. She thought of the cadets who'd doubted her, the officers who'd raised eyebrows. This flight was for them, too, for every time she'd been told to change, to soften, to disappear. By 5:30, she was on the tarmac, helmet under her arm, the Typhoon gleaming under floodlights. Ruiz gave her a nod. "Give 'em hell, Captain." She climbed into the cockpit, the familiar hum of systems powering up like a heartbeat. "Control, this is Echo 2, requesting clearance for runway 19R, she said, her voice steady. "Echo 2, cleared for taxi," came the reply. The Typhoon rolled forward, its engines a low growl. Aisha's pulse was steady, her focus absolute. The sky was hers, and she was ready to claim it. The symposium's second day began with a buzz of anticipation. Attendees gathered on the terrace, a sprawling platform with a clear view of the Virginia skyline. Folding chairs were arranged in neat rows, and a podium stood ready for the announcer, a retired colonel named Paul Whitaker. Claire Hensley checked her tablet, ensuring every detail was in place. The air demonstration was the event's centerpiece, a chance to flex military and corporate muscle for the investors and generals in the crowd. Marcus stood near the back, his hands in his pockets, scanning the horizon. He'd heard whispers of a last-minute addition to the flight schedule, something about a NATO pilot, but no one had details. His gut told him it was Aisha. He hoped she'd show them up, make them choke on their optics. At 7:45 a.m., the first jet, an F-22, roared overhead, its afterburners painting the sky. The crowd clapped politely, phones raised to capture the moment. The Gripen followed, its sleek frame cutting clean lines. Then, a low rumble grew, different from the others, sharper, hungrier. Heads turned, confused. The schedule said the British Typhoon was next, but this jet was moving too fast, too low. Aisha's Eurofighter Typhoon broke the horizon like a dart, its silver-gray skin catching the morning sun. She kept it tight, skimming just above the tree line, the roar of its engines rattling the terrace. The crowd froze, some gasping, others shielding their eyes. Claire's tablet slipped slightly in her hands. "Who authorized that?" she hissed to Elliot, who was already on his radio, demanding answers from the tower. Whitaker, at the podium, fumbled with his notes. Ladies and gentlemen, it appears we have an unscheduled demonstration," he said, his voice trailing off as Aisha banked sharply, pulling a perfect barrel roll. The jet's wings sliced the air, its precision undeniable. She climbed, then dove, executing a low pass that sent a gust of wind rippling through the crowd's jackets. Marcus grinned, his heart racing. "That's her," he whispered. Aisha's voice crackled over the open channel, calm and professional. "This is Captain Aisha Morgan, 332nd Fighter Squadron, demonstrating the Eurofighter Typhoon on behalf of NATO's Joint Readiness Program. Enjoy this show." The name hit Claire like a slap. She turned to Elliot, her face pale. "That's the woman from yesterday. How did she?" Aisha didn't give them time to process. She pulled the Typhoon into a high G-climb, the jet's nose pointing skyward as if defying gravity itself. Then, in a move that drew gasps, she flipped into an inverted pass, the cockpit facing the crowd for a fleeting moment. It wasn't reckless, it was surgical, every maneuver a testament to her mastery. Back in the cockpit, Aisha's world was calm. The controls responded to her slightest touch, the horizon tilting in perfect sync with her will. She thought of the check-in desk, Claire's tight smile, the implication that her uniform, her identity, was a problem. This was her answer. Not words, not arguments, but skill so undeniable it drowned out their doubts. The crowd was no longer seated. Phones were out, recording every move. A retired general near the front muttered, "Who the hell is she?" His aide, checking a tablet, replied, "Captain Morgan, sir. F-35 pilot. Top of her class at the academy." Aisha completed her sequence with a slow, deliberate pass, the Typhoon's engines a low growl that vibrated in the chests of everyone below. Then, as quickly as she'd appeared, she climbed high, disappearing into the morning haze. The silence that followed was deafening, the terrace erupted in murmurs as Aisha's jet vanished. Some clapped, others stood stunned, unsure how to process what they'd just seen. Marcus couldn't stop smiling, his phone already open to X, where posts about the mystery Typhoon pilot were starting to spread. He typed a quick message: Captain Aisha Morgan just domed the sky at Horizon Dynamics. Representation matters. Claire was in damage control mode, her face flushed as she conferenced with Elliot and a senior VP from Horizon. How did we not know about this, she demanded. She wasn't on the manifest. She was added last night, Elliot said, scrolling through emails. NATO cleared it. We didn't get the update. Whitaker, still at the podium, recovered enough to address the crowd. That was Captain Aisha Morgan, a distinguished pilot with the 332nd Fighter Squadron. Let's give her a round of applause for that remarkable demonstration. The applause was hesitant at first, then grew, a few whistles piercing the air. Aisha landed back at Andrews, the Typhoon rolling smoothly to a stop. Ruiz was waiting, a grin splitting his face. You made some noise out there, Captain. Good, she said, pulling off her helmet. Her braid was slightly damp with sweat, but her eyes were bright, focused. She didn't need their applause. She needed them to remember. Back at the symposium, the mood had shifted. The other demonstrations continued, but the buzz was about Aisha. A Pentagon official approached Claire, his tone sharp. Why wasn't Captain Morgan on the panel as scheduled? That kind of talent should be front and center. Claire stammered, there was a misunderstanding about attire. Attire, the official cut in. She's a combat pilot, not a runway model. Fix this. Marcus, emboldened, approached Claire after the demonstrations. Captain Morgan deserved better than being sent away yesterday, he said quietly. Maybe next time, listen to who people are, not what they're wearing. Claire's face tightened, but she nodded. Point taken. Later that day, Aisha received a call from Elena. You're trending on X, Elena said, laughing. They're calling you the Typhoon Queen. Horizon's PR team is scrambling to spin it as their idea. Let them spin, Aisha said. I didn't do it for them. She hung up and stepped outside the hangar, the evening sky now a deep indigo. She thought of her father, who'd told her at 15, you don't just fly for yourself. You fly for everyone who said you couldn't. Today, she'd done exactly that. The symposium wrapped with Horizon announcing a new scholarship for underrepresented pilots, a move Marcus suspected was prompted by Aisha's flight. She didn't attend the closing ceremony, she was already back at base, prepping for her next mission. But her name lingered, a quiet challenge to every room that tried to dim her light. And in the skies above, where no one could touch her, Aisha Morgan soared.